We got a good one for you today. Coming up, the alleged feud between a legendary band and an iconic solo artist has long been a topic of fascination for rock fans and pop culture enthusiasts for a long time. What began as a lyrical exchange in the early 70s soon spiraled into a highly publicized and often misunderstood rivalry. And today's iconic solo artists critique the legendary band's heritage, their part of the world, and their people. It sparked an immediate response from them in one of the most famous anthems of the 70s. They were fighting their rivalry in the lyrics of their songs. This back and forth between the two iconic acts was perceived by many as a deep-seated feud. But was it really as contentious as it seemed? Let's go behind the true story of the supposed conflict and uncover the truth behind the music and the myths that have surrounded it for decades. You're going to want to see this one coming up on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. If you remember watching the 1984 Olympics growing up, rooting for Carl Lewis and Mitch Gaylord and Mary Lou Retton, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now. I know you'll find something to dig on this channel. We also have a Patreon and we have our merch below that helps us keep it a daily channel. So it's time to talk about one of the greatest feuds in rock history. And get the real story here. This has been going on for a while. One afternoon in the early 70s, Ronnie Van Zant and Gary Rossington and Lynyrd Skynyrd were driving around when a familiar voice came over the radio. It was Neil Young. He was singing about the blatant racism in Alabama with his song, Southern Man. Southern Man better. Ronnie turned to Gary and said, we need to write a song that shows people what Alabama's really like. That idea sparked the creation of the classic rock anthem, Sweet Home Alabama. Most people know about this. Sweet Home Alabama. But let's get into what many don't know. Sweet Home Alabama may have started as a response to Neil Young's harsh critique of Alabama, but it quickly grew into what many saw as a musical showdown, with Lynyrd Skynyrd, the Southern Rebels in this corner, and Neil Young, the Northern Yankee from across the U.S.-Canadian border in the other corner. While there seemed to be some tension, most will be shocked to know there was actually no feud at all. Keep your head, don't forget. Let me explain. Neil Young's Southern Man was an editorial calling out racism in Alabama. In the song that was included on the 1970 LP After the Gold Rush, Neil pleads for the South to atone for their sins against humanity, with lyrics like, I saw cotton and I saw black, tall white mansions and little shacks. Southern Man, when will you pay them back? Southern Man, when will you pay them back? The song also mentions the practice of cross burning, referencing the KKK. Crosses are burning back. Upon finishing After the Gold Rush, Neil Young embarked on a series of solo acoustic concerts to promote this album. Following a performance at Carnegie Hall in December 1970, Neil Young took a break from touring and returned to his ranch. Now, during this time, he injured his back while lifting a slab of walnut, which forced him to remain seated while performing. This limited him to acoustic music. Actually, in an August 1975 interview with the great Cameron Crowe, when he was working for Rolling Stone, Neil Young explained, and I quote, I spent the 2 years between After the Gold Rush and Harvest in and out of hospitals. My muscles on one side gave out and my disc slipped. It made it impossible to hold up my guitar. That's why I had to sit down for my entire solo tour. I couldn't move around much, so I laid low at the ranch with little contact with the outside world. I wore a brace, and when David Crosby visited, it would take me 45 minutes just to walk the 400 yards to the studio. Could only stand for 4 hours a day, and I recorded most of Harvest wearing that brace. It's a big part of why it's such a mellow album. I physically couldn't play an electric guitar. Are you ready for the country? Alabama and Words were all songs that were completed after Neil Young's surgery. With doctors discussing the possibility of wheelchairs and other mobility aids, Neil Young decided to have some discs removed. Now, this was a serious, life-altering decision, and as a result, he spent much of the next 2 years lying flat on his back. Alabama. Now, when Ronnie Van Zant began writing his response to what he heard Neil Young sing about, his intention was to, stand by his fellow Southerners, not necessarily to fire back at Neil Young. When Sweet Home Alabama was released in 1973 and blasted over the airwaves to become an instant classic, the Van Zant lyrics that really set people off were the song's second verse, where Ronnie calls out Neil, while the title of Neil's song is softly sung in the background by Al Cooper, the record's producer. A lot of people don't know that. When Ronnie sings, "Well, I heard Mr. Young sing about her," Al's barely audible Southern man can be heard. Mr. Young sing about her. Ronnie continues the song with the lines, "Well, I heard old Neil put her down. Well, I hope Neil Young will remember, Southern man don't need him around anyhow." Classic lyrics. Now, in the verse where Ronnie sings, "In Birmingham, they love the governor," followed by that audible boo, 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 it's been debated whether the band was supporting or criticizing Alabama's then Governor George Wallace, known for his segregationist views. Wallace reportedly loved the line about Birmingham, but he didn't get that they were saying boo, boo, boo. A lot of people don't think they are. There's been a lot of argument about this, but Lynyrd Skynyrd, their members, have consistently clarified that they were not fans of Wallace, and the boo, boo, boo was meant to amplify that disapproval. Though often viewed as an anthem of Southern pride, Sweet Home Alabama was actually meant to be more than just a fond recollection of the band's first time in the recording studio, referencing Muscle Shoals and Swampers. It served as a reminder that not all Southerners fit that redneck stereotype. Lynyrd Skynyrd's critique of Neil Young's Southern man was directed at the sweeping generalization that all Southerners are redneck bigots, which is ridiculous. He said, "We thought Neil was shooting all the ducks to kill one or two." That's what Ronnie said. "We're Southern rebels, but more than that, we know the difference between right and wrong." So in other words, Ronnie was saying, don't condemn Southerners now for what their ancestors did in the past. There's a new generation of Southerners that want to get rid of that shameful stereotype. Sweet home, Alabama, oh, sweet home. Skynyrd was in the midst of recording their second album, Second Helping, at Studio One in Doraville, Georgia, with Al Cooper, co-founder of Blood, Sweat, and Tears. He was serving as the producer. Now, the first track they worked on was Sweet Home Alabama, cut one of the record. As Ronnie would clarify in an interview a few years after the release of Sweet Home Alabama as the lead single, he actually said the tune was written as a joke. According to Ronnie Van Zant, they didn't even think about it. The words just came out, the way that they did. Ronnie went on to say that all of them laughed like hell because they thought it was just funny. But since they all loved Neil Young, as an artist, and they loved his music, they did take time to consider what he might think of this tune. In the press, Ronnie described Neil as an amazing artist. He called him a superstar. Nevertheless, Ronnie ran the lyrics by Skynyrd's lead guitarist at the time, Ed King, who also co-wrote the musical arrangement for Sweet Home Alabama. He wanted to get his opinion, make sure that he was going the right direction here. What will Neil think of the second verse? This is what he asked Ed. With no doubt in his mind, Ed thought, you know what, Neil's going to dig it. He'll also get a nice chuckle out of the reference made towards him. Ed believed the tune wasn't really a direct attack on Neil. It was what he called a good regional song. Al Cooper, of course, made the whispering impersonation of Neil on the recording of Sweet Home Alabama. He validated Ed's intuition. And he actually said that Neil loved the song. He said, "He told me to my face." Now, Gary Rossington, the last remaining original member of Lynyrd Skynyrd, passed away in 2023 after a long battle with heart disease. We did a tribute to him. Along with Ronnie Van Zant and Ed King, Gary was also credited for writing Sweet Home Alabama. It was actually Gary's little guitar lick that got the recording rolling for Ronnie to lay down his vocal track. Having been with Ronnie Van Zant at the very moment the idea for Sweet Home Alabama was born, Gary was the most qualified to set the record straight, and he did. In a 2015 interview with Garden and Gun, he clarified the true meaning behind the iconic Southern rock anthem. He said, and I quote, "Everyone thought Sweet Home Alabama was about Neil Young, but it was really about Alabama. We had toured there, we played clubs and National Guard armories, and everyone was just really nice. End of quote. On the north side of the alleged feud between Neil Young and Lynyrd Skynyrd was Mr. Young, old Neil, as Ronnie called him. Neil was deeply concerned about Southern man's message of anti-racism and anti-violence. During his 1973 tour, he canceled a show in Oakland, California, after a fan was beaten and forcibly removed from the stage by a security guard while Neil was performing the song in concert. Now, the troubling incident happened on March 31st, 1973 in Oakland. This is while Southern Man was playing, and an enthusiastic fan approached the stage. He was dancing, he was enjoying the music, and a security guard intervened, aggressively removing the fan, and in the process, beating the living crap out of him. This incident prompted Neil Young to abruptly stop the show, leave the stage, and then cancel the rest of the performance. He felt the violent act directly contradicted the song's message of tolerance. In his book, Waging Heavy Peace, A Hippie Dream, Neil Young explained that Lynyrd Skynyrd wrote Sweet Home Alabama not as a direct response to Southern Man, but actually in reaction to his song Alabama. So a lot of people have this song wrong that they're even alleging. Young acknowledged that the implied criticism in Sweet Home Alabama was warranted. In hindsight, Neil felt his lyrics in Alabama came across as a little bit condescending and accusatory. Those were his words. In fact, Neil came to regret ever writing the song in the first place. I'll give you his exact words. He said, "Alabama richly deserved the shot Lynyrd Skynyrd gave me with their great record. I don't like my words when I listen to it today. They are accusatory and condescending, not fully thought out, too easy to misconstrue. Oh, Alabama, can I see you and shake your hand? Make friends down in Alabama, I'm from a new land. I come to you and see all this ruin. What are you doing, Alabama? You got the rest of the Union to help you along. What's going wrong?" Now, Neil Young has expressed admiration for both Sweet Home Alabama and for Ronnie Van Zant. In fact, in 1976, he said, no quote, Skynyrd, they play like they mean it. I'm proud to have my name in a song like theirs. Now, shortly after the tragic plane crash in 1977, that claimed the lives of 3 Lynyrd Skynyrd members, including Ronnie Van Zant, Neil Young performed a medley of Alabama and Sweet Home Alabama as a tribute. This all went down at Bicentennial Park in Miami, Florida on November 12, 1977. This special performance was part of a charity event for Children's Hospital with the Gone with the Wind Orchestra. Now, during the concert, Neil Young changed the lyric chorus from Alabama to Sweet Home Alabama in homage to Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, Cassie Gaines, and the others who lost their lives in the 1977 plane crash outside of Macomb, Mississippi. So reflecting on the performance in an interview with the Boston Globe, Neil Young said, and I quote, "I just sang, I hope you all will remember." Well, that was a cool thing. Now, according to Rolling Stone magazine, Neil Young has not played Alabama since then. When evaluating the supposed feud between Lynyrd Skynyrd and Neil Young, the saying actions speak louder than words, it really helps in reaching an educated conclusion, is what I mean. Both Ronnie Van Zant and Neil Young addressed the controversy head-on in a very sacred way that any rock musician will understand. They actually did it by wearing each other's merchandise during live performances, showing their respect for one another directly on stage in front of thousands of fans. Actually, in Gene Odom's book, Lynyrd Skynyrd, Remembering the Free Birds of Southern Rock, it's actually mentioned that Ronnie Van Zant often wore one of his Neil Young t-shirts on stage to playfully mess with those in the audience, who didn't get the humor and irony behind the Sweet Home Alabama lyrics. To show his camaraderie, Neil has worn a vintage Lynyrd Skynyrd shirt during his concerts, alongside occasionally performing Sweet Home Alabama. I just think that's so cool. In the concert film Rust Never Sleeps, you can spot Billy Talbot, the bassist for Neil's band Crazy Horse, and he's rocking a Lynyrd Skynyrd t-shirt that resembles a Jack Daniel's whiskey label. Ronnie Van Zant was famously seen sporting a Tonight's the Night t-shirt. That's, of course, the title of Neil's sixth studio album, most notably on the cover of Lynyrd Skynyrd's Street Survivors album. Now, there was even a rumor that Ronnie Van Zant was buried in that very shirt. Rolling Stone and various sources suggested that this might be true, but in an interesting essay in Tone and Groove, it debunks that outlandish story. It turns out the idea of Ronnie being buried in a Neil Young t-shirt is just another myth, one that adds to the tragic legend of his life. Even stranger, some Skynyrd fans allegedly dug up his grave trying to confirm the rumor. They claim they saw him in a black Neil Young Tonight's the Night shirt. However, police reports confirm that the coffin was never actually opened.
Little girl, what's your name?
To truly put a pin on the urban myth around a Neil Young-Lynyrd Skynyrd feud, let's talk about a song that Neil wrote titled Powderfinger, okay? In September 1975, Neil Young recorded a solo acoustic version of Powderfinger at Indigo Ranch Recording Studio, Malibu, California. He planned to include it on his unreleased mid-70s album, Chrome Dreams. Now, Neil sent the tape of his recording of Powderfinger to Ronnie Van Zant, from Skynyrd, with the idea that Ronnie would use it for their next album. But the plane crash, it took Ronnie's life, and it squashed that plan for Lynyrd Skynyrd to record Powderfinger. Instead, Neil eventually released an electric version of the track on his 1979 album, Rust Never Sleeps, with Crazy Horse. Now, the original acoustic version from the Indigo Ranch session was finally released in 2017 on the album Hitchhiker, which features other tracks from that recording period. Now, given how principled Neil is as an artist and how protective he is about his music, it's really hard to believe that Neil would offer one of his songs to Ronnie Van Zant without having a genuine respect and admiration for him as a fellow musician, right? Besides Powderfinger, it's rumored that Neil also handed over Sedan Delivery and Captain Kennedy to Ronnie for Skynyrd to record. To me, gifting Ronnie the chance to record even one of his songs is the ultimate sign of high esteem and friendship towards Lynyrd Skynyrd by Neil Young. So the myths and the urban legends surrounding the Lynyrd Skynyrd tragedy of 1977 seem to be endless, even fueled by the survivors themselves. Actually, on VH1's Lynyrd Skynyrd's Uncivil War, keyboardist Billy Powell, who delivered the lively honky-tonk flavored piano parts that were layered into Sweet Home Alabama, he even admitted to fabricating details about the crash in a 1997 interview on VH1's series Behind the Music. It's no surprise that VH1 later included the Lynyrd Skynyrd versus Neil Young controversy in their top 40 all-time celebrity feuds in 2003. You think about it, much of the hubbub about a rift between the rockers is spawned from the duality of the American South. This song, it's a wise reminder not to judge all people by the fruits of a few bad apples. I mean, all these years later, the beloved phrase Sweet Home Alabama, it's actually used on Alabama license plates. The song is still massive, known by everyone, virtually everywhere. It was and is a Southern anthem, written not by Alabama natives, but by Floridians who felt that they were being wrongly characterized by a rock icon they idolized. Over time, words have been evaluated and reevaluated, and with further inspection, there was no harm intended by the writing of Southern Man or Sweet Home Alabama. So in the end, outside of some lyrics going back and forth and a few songs to kind of tweak each other, the truth is there was no feud between Neil Young and Lynyrd Skynyrd. Neil Young and Ronnie Van Zant, they were not adversaries. They were brothers from different borders who wrote and sang with sincerity and purpose. That's why their respective songs continue to make a statement in the very complicated and really sometimes confusing world we still live in. If you play Southern Man by Neil Young and Sweet Home Alabama by Lynyrd Skynyrd back-to-back, which you should do that after, I'll link to both of them so you can do that, you can really feel the truth that lies in both songs, representing the atrocities of the past and the efforts to progress into a new generation of unity and equality. I mean, this is one of the first really deep music stories that my father told me about music, when I was growing up. I mean, I must have been 7 or 8 years old when he told me. And it motivated me to go listen to the lyrics of each song, really scrutinize the music instead of believing an opinion or an urban legend. I went and did the work, the research to find the real truth. It's a lesson I've used to this day. Thanks, Dad. Leave us a comment about Lynyrd Skynyrd and Neil Young and these two remarkable songs. Southern Man, what a great song. Sweet Home Alabama might be the greatest rock song of all time. Definitely one of the greatest guitar riffs ever. It's a great story, and it's so rich with history. And tell me what you think. What are your opinion? Do you think that he was trying to tweak Neil Young there? Was it written as a joke? What is your opinion on it? Let's have a great discussion about two great band, a great band and a great artist. And if you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. What other feuds or other urban legends should we cover and tell the truth on? Let me know, and I'll go undercover and figure it out. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.